Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And we are here to talk about this lawsuit that Lizette Martinez, Lisa Van Allen, Kelly Rogers, Faith Rogers, Roderick Guttrell, and Jim Pratt have filed against Don Russell, Robert Sylvester Kelly, RSK Enterprise LLC, and the Indy Bill Corp. I guess these don't get tired, okay? Like, they are determined that they are going to sue and try and get some money rather than go and get a damn job like the rest of us, okay? So this lawsuit is about 46 pages long. Like, what do they have to talk about, okay, for 46 pages? But we're going to get into it. But before we do, you guys know that Faith Rogers had already filed a lawsuit against Mr. Kelly back in, oh my God, it was back in 2019 maybe. And that lawsuit has been stayed and continued and stayed and continued and stayed and continued. She's changed attorneys because, as I previously told you guys, her attorney was arrested in a fraud case involving her aunt and trying to hide funds from the government. The aunt was supposed to sell some property, and the lawyer got involved, and her and the aunt got arrested, okay? So then she took on a new lawyer, and it's a black guy. I can't think of his name right now. Let me see if it's on this document. But Faith Rogers has really been trying to get her some money. Oh, Charles Tucker is her new attorney. And so anyway, back in February of this year, there was a stay put on this lawsuit. And so maybe she's going to drop this lawsuit and think she has a better chance in the group lawsuit with the other hookers. So the stipulation on the original lawsuit was that whereas the plaintiff served a first set of interrogatories, requests for admissions, requests for production of documents, and things propounded to defendant, whereas there is currently a criminal trial scheduled in the Eastern District of New York, docket number 19 CR 00286, in April 2021, and in the Northern District of Illinois in or about the end of September of this year. So we know that the April 2021 trial did not happen. Mr. Kelly did go on trial in late August, and a jury that we're not so sure was a real jury, but because they came back with the verdict very quickly, and so we don't know who any other people on that jury was, but we're going to roll with their decision, which was that he was guilty on all charges. And then the Northern District of Illinois case has been pushed to August of 2022. So in this stipulation, the judge was basically saying that all of this needs to wrap up, and that some or even all of the discovery demanded and the discovery that the defendant would be seeking is covered under a protective order in the Eastern District of New York case. And so it is hereby stipulated and agreed by and between the parties through their undersigned counsel that one, all discovery and other proceedings are hereby stayed for 120 days from the date this order is entered. If the cases in the Southern District of New York and the Northern District of Illinois are resolved within 120 days, then the parties shall promptly contact the IAS court to schedule a conference to discuss further proceedings, and the parties reserve all rights to seek a further stay either by agreement or by order of this court or the IAS court. And so they have the Southern District of New York on here. So I'm not sure if they meant the Eastern District of New York, because I don't believe that Mr. Kelly has anything going on in the Southern District of New York. However, Don Russell does. And so maybe some of the information that they needed for this case was, no, I don't know why Don Russell would have been involved, because this original lawsuit had to do with him, with Mr. Kelly supposedly giving Faith Rogers herpes. So that may very well be a typo. And then number 2, plaintiff waives all objection to the timelines of defendants' responses and objections to defendants' first set of interrogatories and to defendants' first request for production of documents and things, which will be provided once this case continues. As a result of this stipulation, the defendant has not waived his right to timely respond and to timely serve discovery demands in this case. The parties, once the case resumes, will continue with discovery, and the defendant will serve responses and demands within 45 days of the stay being lifted. The parties reserve all rights to pursue at the appropriate time subsequent to expiration of the stay and substantive objections or motion practice with respect to each other's discovery requests. And then they talk about the signatures on this document shall be deemed effective for all purposes. And once again, this motion was dated February 5th, 2021, with the anticipation that Mr. Kelly was going on trial in April of 2021. But we know that that trial took place in August, concluded in September, and his sentencing will take place in May 4th of 2022, and then the Northern District of Illinois case begins in August. And so all of that needs to conclude before this discovery is released. And so maybe this is why Faith Rogers has started a whole nother lawsuit, because this one is in a stay. It can't move forward until, I guess, they have access to the discovery, which is under a protective order. And so Thomas Farinella signed off on this motion, or on this stipulation for Mr. Kelly. But once again, that was back in February. So we are not sure if he is still on the case or not, if he's still part of Mr. Kelly's team. So now let's move over to this other lawsuit that these hookers filed. And this lawsuit, let me see, what day was this? This was filed on December 1st, 2021. And once again, they filed it in the Supreme Court of the state of New York, County of New York. Not sure why Lizette and Lisa Van Allen are on this, because they didn't have nothing going on in New York. But anyway, we're going to read this document and see what it has to say. And then once again, they have added extra people onto the lawsuit: Don Russell, RSK Enterprise, and Indie Bill Corp. I'm not even sure RSK Enterprise is still in existence. And then Indie Bill Corp is Don Russell's company. But what is it really worth? Did it ever really get off the ground? So anyway, it says, to the above named defendants, you are hereby summoned to answer the complaint in this action and to serve a copy of your answer, or if the plaintiff is not served with the summons, to serve notice of appearance on the plaintiff's attorneys within 20 days after the service of this summons, exclusive of the day of service, where service is made by delivery upon you personally within the state, or within 30 days after completion of service, where service is made in any other manner. In case of your failure to appear to answer, judgment will be taken against you by default for the relief demand in the complaint. And let's see, it has Kristen Fedden, Robert Mungazuli, Saltz, Mungazuli, and Badesky PC. And this is a law firm, it appears, out of Philadelphia. So I guess these heifers have gotten a whole new attorney. Maybe the Charles Tucker man is tired of dealing with this, or maybe Faith ain't paid him no money. So anyway, they have all of the addresses where they sent this to. So Don Russell was served at an apartment in Chicago. Mr. Kelly was served at the MDC Brooklyn. And then the RSK Enterprises has LaSalle Street. But isn't that where the... Is that where the studio was located at? Or maybe LaSalle Street. Maybe this address is like a... I don't know. Or is that the address to the Trump Tower? I'm not sure. Anyway, and then the Indy bill is looks like a box number in Chicago. So I'm not sure if they're going to get any response. And does Don Russell really have any money? So let's go ahead here. It says plaintiffs by and through their attorneys Saltz, Munjazuli, and Bendesky, complaining of the defendants respectfully, alleges upon information and belief, and then we have the introduction. This is a civil action to recover damages for serious harm, trauma, and emotional distress resulting from defendants and others, known and unknown, who intimidated, harassed, and threatened plaintiffs and other young women in order to stop them from participating in an event intended to publicize their personal experiences of sexual, physical, and mental abuse at the hands of Robert Sylvester Kelly and the collection of individuals and companies making up Kelly's inner circle. Herein, inner circle, that helped Kelly recruit, traffic, control, abuse, harass, and silence these same individuals. Lord, if these hoes don't go somewhere and sit down. Okay, child. Parties. Plaintiff Lizette Martin as an individual who resides in Florida. Plaintiff Lisa Van Allen is an individual who resides in Georgia. Plaintiff Roderick Guttrell is an individual who resides in Georgia. Kelly Rogers is an individual who resides in Texas. Faith Rogers is an individual who resides in Texas. Jim Pratt is an individual who resides in Illinois. Donnell Russell is a citizen that resides at 1826 South Millard Avenue, Apartment 1, Chicago, Illinois. At all relevant times herein, Defendant Russell served and or held himself out as Kelly's manager, current advisor, joint venturer, agent, representative, servant, employee, principal, management company, and or representative. Defendant Robert Sylvester Kelly, also referred herein as Kelly, is a citizen and resides at MDC Brooklyn, 8029th Street, Brooklyn, New York. Defendant RSK Enterprises LLC, RSK, is a company that worked exclusively with Kelly to provide entertainment services in contracting Kelly's music performances and personal appearances to various venues. Affidavit in support of arrest at U.S. versus Russell, Eastern District of New York, 2020. 12. RSK principal place of business is believed to be located at 203 North LaSalle Street, Suite 2550, Chicago, Illinois. And upon information and belief, RSK stands for Robert Sylvester Kelly. 13. The principal purposes of the Inner Circle were to promote Kelly's music and the R. Kelly brand and to recruit women and girls to engage in activity with Kelly by promoting Kelly's music and the R. Kelly brand. The members of the Inner Circle expected to receive financial opportunities and personal benefits, including increased power and status within the enterprise. Child, why is they taking the verbiage from the Lord Jesus? What do they call it? The indictments. So they're getting this information from the indictment, from Don Russell's indictment. Okay. So RSK is also the exclusive licensee of the registered trademark R. Kelly with registration number $2,638,246. CRSK Enterprises LLC versus Comcast. Spectator. Then they give the case number. Defendant Indie Bill Corp is an entertainment industry platform located at 910 West Van Buren Street, number 100-352, Chicago, Illinois, 60607. At the time of the actions and inactions that gave rise to herein cause of action, Russell was the founder, president, and or CEO of Indie Bill Corp. And has been associated with Indie Bill Corp. since 2015. 17. Upon information and belief at all relevant times, defendant Russell acted as defendant's duly and authorized agent. What? 18. Upon information and belief at all times, Russell and all herein defendants are part and played a role in Kelly's inner circle. Well, we already know that's not going to hold up. 19. Upon information and belief, each defendant, whether specifically named or designated in this complaint, was the agent, representative, servant, employee, principal, joint venturer, management company, and or representative of each of the remaining co-defendants, and in doing the acts alleged herein was acting within the course and scope of such agency, employment, joint venture, agreement, management, company agreement, and or service with the approval, knowledge, authority, permission, and or consent of the remaining defendants. 20. All herein defendants, including its leadership, membership, associates, actual, apparent, and ostensible agents, servants, employees, and independent contractors function as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving several objectives, including but not limited to promoting Kelly's music and the R. Kelly brand, recruit women and young females to engage in illegal activity with Kelly, and protecting the R. Kelly brand by, among other things and omissions, silencing an individual able to disclose any information that could be harmful to Kelly's reputation. Child, and then they back to quoting U.S. versus Russell. 21. In fact, defendants, together with other employees, including managers, bodyguards, drivers, accountants, personal assistants, and we know this statement came from the Eastern District of New York. Like, can we have some originality, ladies? Create your own verbiage, all right? Drivers, accountants, personal assistants, and runners and other individuals associated with Kelly and defendants engaged in a racketeering enterprise that operated for over 3 decades, preyed upon adults and children, inclusive of some of herein plaintiffs, so that the victims could be perpetually available to be subjected to illegal activity with Kelly at a moment's notice. Just say your clients are whores that flew across the country to get screwed and say that they were with Mr. Kelly, okay? Just be honest with what is going on here. 22. Kelly's multiple arrests, trial testimony, and September 27, 2021 guilty conviction of racketeering and multiple predicate acts, including illegal sexual misconduct with minors, sexual exploitation, bribery, coercion, and forced labor, made clear that R. Kelly's enterprise was not only engaged in music, as alleged for 3 decades. The enterprise, at the direction of Kelly, preyed upon young women and teenagers whose dreams of meeting a superstar soon turned into a nightmare of rape, pornography, and forced labor. Child, please. Press release. R. Kelly charged with racketeering, including predicate acts of coercing and transporting minor girls to engage in sex. Department of Justice, United States Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York. Statement from Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent in Charge, Maria Cruz Melendez. I thought that hooker was, did she change positions? Because I thought she was a prosecutor in the case. Is she now the Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent in charge? Did she get a promotion, or would that be a demotion? Or do they have her title listed wrong? 23. Moreover, when his victims tried to escape, okay, they didn't have to escape. They could have just walked out the door. Wasn't the door open for them to leave? Anyway, they tried to escape as they were flying back and forth across the country, doing whatever they felt like doing, showing up, leaving. But when they tried to escape, Mr. Kelly and his accomplices silenced them through bribery, intimidation, and physical violence. Child, now they just making stuff up. See press release. R. Kelly convicted of all counts by federal jury in Brooklyn. Department of Justice, United States Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York. Statement from Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent in Charge, Peter C. Fitzu. 24. By promoting Kelly's music and the R. Kelly brand, all herein defendants expected to receive financial opportunities and personal benefits, including increased power and status. 25. Hence, defendants were prepared, even to the detriment of plaintiffs, to act in furtherance of that common goal, inclusive of protecting Kelly's image and the R. Kelly brand. Wow. Jurisdiction and venue. 26. The court also has jurisdiction over the defendants pursuant to CPLR 302 because the defendant committed various tortious acts within the state of New York as set forth in the instant complaint, and specifically occurred at Newhouse Madison Square, Newhouse, located at 110 East 25th Street, New York, New York, 10010. 27. The action is properly brought pursuant to CPLR Section 215-8A. Okay, so basically, what these people are all involved with surviving R. Kelly, or they attended the R. Kelly screening, which Don Russell is about to go to court for, because he interrupted and caused that screening to be canceled with his crazy behavior. That has nothing to do with R. Kelly, because R. Kelly didn't tell him to do whatever it was that he was trying to do. So the reason all of these people are in this lawsuit is because they were at that screening, and so they're claiming that they were harmed in some kind of way because of Don Russell's actions. So the next section, defendant Kelly's fame and predatory reign. Ain't this reading like a good novel, y'all? So 28. Around 1989, Kelly gained national recognition when he and two other singers, all together as part of a band called Musically Gifted Men, or Mentally Gifted Men, or MGM, child, they don't even know what the name of the group was, released a single entitled Why You Wanna Play Me, and performed other musical performances on television. 29. Though the MGM group disbanded shortly after the release of the single, Kelly gained national recognition, and in or around 1991, he signed with RCA Jive Records. 30. In 1992, Kelly released his debut album, Born, credited as Kelly and Public Announcement, and went on tour. 31. In 1993, Kelly released his solo album, 12 Play, which sold 6 million copies. 32. 12 Play yielded Kelly's first #1 hit entitled Bump and Grind, which spent a record-breaking 12 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot Rhythm and Blues R&B singles chart. 33. Additionally, he had two subsequent hit singles from the 12 Play album, Your Body's Calling and Sex Me, both singles of which sold 500,000 copies in the United States and were certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA, a trade organization that represents the recording industry in the United States. 34. In 1994, 12 Play was certified gold by the RIAA, eventually going 6 times platinum. 35. It was around this time, on August 31st, 1994, at age 27, that Kelly married 15-year-old R&B singer Aaliyah D. Holton, allegedly because she was pregnant and he did not want to be criminally prosecuted for impregnating and having sexual contact with her. See Associated Press, timeline of R. Kelly's life and career, February 23rd, 2019. Y'all, why do they have all these newspaper articles and gossip publications and blog sites as their sources for information? Like, come on, y'all. 36. The marriage was annulled months later because of Aaliyah's age. 37. Importantly, Kelly was convicted of, with the aid of his inner circle, bribing a state employee to create an identification card for her when 15 years old so that Kelly could marry her because he believed she was pregnant and therefore the marriage could keep him out of jail. See superseding indictment, U.S. versus Kelly, Eastern District of New York. Also, press release, R. Kelly convicted of all counts by a federal jury in Brooklyn. Department of Justice, United States Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York, September 27, 2021. 38. In 1995, Kelly garnered his first Grammy nominations, 2 for writing, producing, and composing Michael Jackson's last #1 hit, You Are Not Alone. 39. Kelly's success continued with the November 14, 1995 release of R. Kelly, his second studio album. 40. This album reached #1 on the Billboard 20 chart, becoming Kelly's first #1 album on the chart, and reached #1 on the R&B album charts. 41. There were 3 platinum hit singles in the R. Kelly album: You Remind Me of Something, I Can't Sleep Baby, If I, and Down Low, Nobody Has to Know. What does any of this have to do with this lawsuit? 42. The album also sold 4 million copies, receiving 4-time platinum certification from the RIAA. 43. On November 26, 1996, Kelly released single I Believe I Can Fly, which reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and #1 on the United Kingdom charts for 3 weeks and won 3 Grammy Awards in 1998. 44. In that same year, Kelly contributed the single Freak Tonight for the A Thin Line Between Love and Hate soundtrack. 45. In 1997, Kelly signed a contract to play professional basketball with the Atlantic City Seagulls of the United States Basketball League, wherein he wore the number 12 in honor of his album 12 Play, therein promoting his musical image and likeness even more. Okay, all right. 46. Importantly, upon information and belief, Kelly's USBL contract contained a clause that would allow him to fulfill music obligations when necessary. Can somebody please tell me, what does any of this have to do with what happened at the screening of Surviving Lives? Please put it in the comments and let me know what you think is the relevance of them outlining all this nonsense about what happened at the screening of Surviving Lives. Please let me know. 47. Because basically what it looks like here is that they have taken that article that Jim Derogatis wrote back in, was it 2015 or 2017? When all of this nonsense, because you guys know this whole thing was orchestrated, right? And it started with this article that Jim Derogatis wrote, and it was released, I believe, maybe it was, I can't remember what year it was. It was either 2015 or 2017. He released the article, then all of a sudden, Geronda Pace did an interview, like in May of 2017, and then that's when you started seeing all this media, where they were going on these talk shows like The Real and Dr. Oz and telling their little woe is me stories about how they were chasing R. Kelly. R. Kelly, gave them they fake boobs and told them how to have sex and all this other stuff. That was going on, that they were consenting adults doing. Flying all over the country, living the life of the girlfriend of one of the biggest R&B singers in history. And so they were getting on, then all of a sudden people started quitting once word got out in 2018 that Surviving Lies had been green lighted, because the media stuff started in 2017. Then Surviving R. Kelly was green lighted in April of 2018. So that's when you start seeing the employees quitting, and then everybody was turning against him, separating themselves from him. And then you had the filming of Surviving Lies, and then the premiere of it when Don Russell decided he was going to interrupt, the premiere. And then where we are today, where these, bogus charges was filed against this man. We had this bogus court hearing in secrecy, which is against the Constitution of the United States. You're supposed to have open court, but we had it all closed and in secret. To this day, don't know who any of these jurors were. We don't even know if these was real jurors or if these were crisis actors that they had up there judging this man and finding him guilty. Like, we don't know, because that's how the government operates. So anyway, moving on with the BS. 47, significantly, on February 18, 1997, Tiffany Hawkins filed a complaint against Kelly for inappropriate sexual conduct beginning in 1991, when Hawkins was 15, up to and including October of 1994. And so what I'm telling you guys is, this is the article that Jim Derogatis wrote. They're just basically turning it into bullet points. 48, the case was settled in January 1998. 49, on November 17, 1998, Kelly released his fourth studio and first double album, R, and thereafter received numerous awards. 50, around May 1999 and October 15, 1999, Kelly was charged with and recently convicted of engaging in exploitation with a minor with the aid of those agents and or members of his inner circle who worked with Kelly to assist him with engaging in and getting away with the criminal act to protect Kelly and the Kelly brand. See superseding indictment, U.S. Kelly convicted of all counts, blah, blah, blah. 51, in January 2000, Kelly won Favorite Male Soul R&B Artist at the American Music Awards, and in February was nominated for several Grammy Awards, including Best Male R&B Vocal Performance for Single When a Woman's Fed Up, Best R&B Album for Album R, and Best Rap Performance by a Duo or a Group or Single, Satisfy You, that he recorded with another artist. 52. On November 7, 2000, Kelly released his fifth studio album, TP2.com. 53. In 2001, Kelly won the Outstanding Achievement Award at the Music of Black Origin or MOBO Awards, and Billboard magazine ranked TP-2.com number 94 on the magazine's top 200 albums of the decade. 54. Kelly also released a single, The World's Greatest, from the soundtrack to the 2001 Ali film, a film that focused on 10 years in the life of Muhammad Ali, played by Will Smith. 55. On February 8, 2002, Kelly performed at the closing ceremony of the 2002 Winter Olympics. 56. At the same time, a news scandal broke of a sex tape that appeared to show Kelly with an underage person. 57. Specifically, the Chicago Sun-Times reported that it received a video allegedly showing Kelly having sex. 58. The paper reported Chicago police began investigating allegations about Kelly and the same girl 3 years earlier. 59. Nevertheless, wait a minute. So they're saying that they began the investigation. Wait, hold on. Okay. 19. So they're claiming that the investigation, I guess, began in 1999, not 2002 when the tape was released. Okay. 59. Nevertheless, on March 19, 2002, Kelly released the first collaborative album with another artist, Jay-Z, called The Best of Both Worlds. 60. The album sold 285,000 copies in its opening week and debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 2000. 61. In June 2002, Kelly was indicted in Chicago on CP charges stemming from the sex tape. 62. Kelly was later acquitted on those charges in May 2008. In January 2003, Kelly was arrested at a Florida hotel on additional CP charges after investigators said they found photos of him having sex with someone. 64. Charges were later dropped after the judge ruled police did not have a warrant to search Kelly's house. 65. Kelly was charged and recently convicted of coercing a female to engage in explicit conduct for the purpose of producing video recordings with the aid of who sought to protect his image, brand, and reputation. See superseding indictment, U.S. versus Kelly, Eastern District of New York. R. Kelly convicted of all counts, blah, blah, blah. 66. On August 24, 2004, Kelly released his 6th studio album and the second double album, Happy People, You Saved Me, which debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, selling 264,000 copies in its first week. 67. On October 26, 2004, Kelly released his second album and final collaborative album with Jay-Z called Unfinished Business. 68. The album sold 215,000 copies in its opening week and debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. 69. It was also certified platinum by the RIAA in December 2004. 70. On July 5, 2005, Kelly released his 7th studio album, an album that became Kelly's 4th number 1 on the Billboard 200 album chart and sold 1.52 million copies in the United States. 71. In September 2005, Kelly's then current, now former wife, Andrea Kelly, sought an order of protection from her husband, accusing the singer of hitting her when she said she wanted a divorce. 72. The divorce was finalized in 2009. 73. On May 15, 2007, Kelly released the single Double Up and went on tour with several other artists thereafter. 74. Over the past 2 decades, Kelly made an estimated $150 million for his label with 32 million album sales. 75. As a touring, let's back up there. Let's go back to 74. It was actually Kelly made $150 million. The label made a whole lot more than that. The $150 million was his take-home pay, not the label's take-home pay, because the label probably made 3 times that. Okay, 75. As a touring act, he was nearly as formidable with gross revenue of $5.7 million on the 2003 tour, $13.7 million on a joint tour with Jay-Z in 2004, and $8.3 million on a 2007 solo tour. 76. During the entirety of this time, however, he was abusing, torturing, and exploiting. All right, if y'all say so. 77. In 2008, Billboard named Kelly among the most successful artists for its 50th anniversary list. 78. In June 2009, Kelly released his first mixtape, the demo tape Gangsta Gorillas. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop numbering these points and just read this like the book that it is, okay? So Kelly also headlined the Arise Fashion Awards in Johannesburg, South Africa on June 20th, 2009, and in January 2010 performed in Kampala, Uganda. During this time, May 2009 and January 2010, Kelly, with assistance from those of his inner circle who sought to protect Kelly's brand, image, and reputation, was regularly speaking with a minor female over the telephone to arrange for her to come to his residence in Olympia Fields for the purpose of engaging in activity which was illegal because she was too young to consent in sex in Illinois. Superseding indictment, U.S. versus Kelly. Also see the press release from the Eastern District of New York. Kelly was recently charged with and convicted of this crime. Around November 2010, Kelly wrote and produced Hands Across the World. A month later, okay, wait a minute, is that Geronda Pace they trying to claim this? Okay. Anyway, a month later, on December 10, 2010, Kelly released his 10th album, Love Letter, one single of which was Kelly singing You Are Not Alone, a track Kelly originally wrote for Michael Jackson. The first single on that album, When a Woman Loves, was nominated for a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Vocal Performance at the 53rd Annual Grammy Awards. At the 2011 Pre-Grammy Gala in Los Angeles, Kelly performed a medley of his hits, and in March 2011, Kelly was named the #1 R&B artist of the last 25 years by Billboard. In 2012, Kelly made a series of announcements, including a follow-up to the Love Letter album titled Write Me Back, a third installment of the Trapped in the Closet and the Single Ladies Tour. In February 2012, Kelly performed I Look to You, a song he wrote for Whitney Houston at Houston's homegoing. On June 30th, 2013, Kelly performed live at BET Awards show singing hits as well as his new track, My Story, which was the lead single for Kelly's 12th studio album, Black Panties, which was released on December 10th, 2013. In July 2014, Kelly announced that he was working on a house music album. Between September 2015 and October 2015, Kelly, with the aid of his inner circle and those who sought to protect Kelly's image, brand, and reputation, transported a 17-year-old young minor female from New York City to Oakland, California for the purpose of engaging in activity. As she was too young to consent to sex in California, see superseding indictment, U.S. versus Kelly, Eastern District of New York, blase, 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 and read that press release that came out in September 27, 2021. Kelly was recently charged with and convicted of this crime, and I guess they're talking about Ariel at that point. Okay, moreover, in May of 2017 and February 2018, Kelly, with the aid of his inner circle and those who sought to protect Kelly's image, brand, and reputation, was charged and recently convicted of arranging for another female to fly from her home in San Antonio, Texas, to Queens, New York for the purpose of illegal activity, which was illegal because Kelly knew he had an incurable STD and did not inform the female about the STD prior to engaging in intercourse with her. And we know her to be Faith Rogers. And as a participant in those consensual sexual acts, Faith Rogers should have had an obligation to use a condom, okay? And did she convey her sexual health status to him? I don't think she did. But anyway, we're going to move along. On October 21st, 2016, Kelly presented his first Christmas album and 14th studio album, 12 Nights of Christmas. Thus, as is clear from the tragic history, defendants and many others knew of Kelly's pervasive abuse of young, often underage women, and failed to take any action to help plaintiffs or any of the other similarly situated young women, likely to protect the R. Kelly brand name, reputation, image, and continued fame, success, and financial benefit. Defendants were also aware of and acted in furtherance to engage in acts to intimidate, silence, threaten, and physical and sexually assault women who disclosed Kelly's misconduct. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Surviving Lies docuseries, okay? And can we really call it a docuseries, or was it just a docudrama? Let's call it a docudrama, okay? So we're on to point 96. In or around May 2018, Lifetime, a cable channel began working on a docudrama series focusing on the Kelly so-called survivors. The title for the series was Surviving Lies. Okay, let me stop. 98. This documentary detailed accounts that Kelly engaged in unlawful activity with numerous women, including some of herein plaintiffs, and engaged in sexually, physically, and emotional abusive relationships with several women who were willingly with him, who had the opportunity to walk out the door at any time, and who were not being held against their will. 99. So y'all know that ain't what it say. Y'all know I'm just ad-libbing here, plugging in the facts of what really was taking place. 99. All herein plaintiffs were either women or individuals supporting women that found or were finding the courage to face their trauma and participate in the docu-lies. As a result of the release of this docudrama, 2 charges were palpable. First, the so-called survivors of Kelly, or shall we say the scorned ex-lovers of Kelly, were finding community and healing and sharing their experience and strength in publicly overcoming years of bad decisions. But they call it sustained abuse here. 102. Second, Kelly and his associates, inclusive of herein defendants, were recognizing the commercial and personal harm they would collectively suffer the more publicity Kelly's ex-groupies received. Okay, but they refer to them as victims in this, but we know they were groupies. 103. As a result of the latter realization, Kelly and his inner circle and or associates and or agents, including defendants, began an orchestrated effort to silence, harass, bribe, and intimidate those brave young women and their friends and family, as well as isolate them from their friends and family. Child, how was they isolating them from anybody when the man wasn't even thinking about them no more? He was like, shoo fly, get on out of here. So what do they care about their friends and family and trying to isolate them? People in abusive relationships, the abuser would try to isolate you. But when you just a groupie that done been sent home and told to go about your business, they don't care about your friends or family. They like, go on, leave me alone. But, their distorted view of reality says it a little differently. So in addition to other efforts at issue in this complaint is the orchestrated attack on those involved in the public premiere of Surviving Lies on December 4th, 2018. To cancel this premiere showing, which was to include not only a viewing of the docudrama, but also a panel discussion with some of the Kelly's former groupies, including some of the herein plaintiffs. Defendants used escalating methods of intimidation, moving from legal to terroristic in matter of hours. Woo! Alrighty then. Okay, so the next section. Defendants escalating attempts to cancel the premiere screening of Surviving Lies. Cease and desist email to Newhouse. So on December 4th, 2018, Newhouse, in collaboration with Lifetime Television Channel, was scheduled to host the premiere screening of the docudrama Surviving Lies. Therein, after the screening, complaint United States versus Russell. And then they have a link where you can download a press release. And then guests inclusive of all herein plaintiffs to the screening were expected to arrive at Newhouse on December 4th, 2018 at approximately 6:30 p.m. The screening was scheduled to occur from approximately 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. with a panel discussion to be held following its conclusion. The participants in the panel discussion included ex-groupies of Kelly's, alleged sexual, physical, and mental abuse, including plaintiffs who appeared in the docudrama. Throughout the day of the screening, Russell, along with at least one associate or member with Kelly's inner circle, conspired about ways to convince to prevent the docudrama from airing, utilizing their personal phones, a phone issued to defendant Indibill Corp that Russell was using, and email. Let me stop there. Why is it that Don Russell is going on trial? Kelly has already been on trial, getting ready to go to another trial. We know that Cash Jones was a part of this whole thing with Don Russell. Why has she not been a part of the Eastern District of New York prosecution against Mr. Kelly? Why is she not a defendant in Don Russell's case? And why is she not listed as a defendant in this bogus lawsuit that has been filed? Like, that should tell us a lot about Cash Jones and her involvement in all of this. This girl must have some kind of protection. Like, she must be a informant for the government and is securely protected, okay, from any type of prosecution, lawsuit, or anything. Because it doesn't make sense that her name is not even mentioned. Like, she's considered in other parties, okay? Like, this is so crazy. But anyway, we're going to move on with the story. So 111. Importantly, the Indibill Corp phone that defendant Russell used in furtherance of the scheme described herein, which led to plaintiff's great emotional distress, trauma, and harm, is subscribed to in the name of defendant Indibill Corp. United States versus Russell. The phone subscribed to in the name of defendant Indibill Corp was seized from defendant Russell's person by law enforcement in or about July 2019, when law enforcement executed a judicially authorized search warrant in connection with investigation of the crime, which gives rise to the civil action. On December 4th, 2018, defendant Russell, along with another individual who we know is Cash Jones, the other individual in this case would be his mom, June, drafted a cease and desist from both his personal and business email account to Lifetime executives and Newhouse in an effort to prevent the screening, a fact not in dispute given defendant Russell's admission. Throughout this day, Russell and the other individual communicated via Russell's personal phone, a phone subscribed to Indibill Corp phone and other devices. The cease and desist draft email expressed his concerns regarding the upcoming Surviving Lies production. The draft email also noted, "Now, I'm certain you and your production team have met the acquaintance of the alleged survivors or groupies, as they should be called, and had ample time to witness the character of each of these women and or parents individually." At approximately 6:18 p.m., a person using the defendant Indibill Corp cell phone claiming to represent Kelly called Newhouse and spoke to a Newhouse employee and informed the employee that he intended to serve a cease and desist letter on Newhouse to prevent the screening of Surviving Lies. This call lasted a little under 7 minutes. Approximately 50 minutes later, at 6:58 p.m., a cease and desist letter was emailed to Newhouse from a person purporting to be an attorney, demanding in substance and in part that Newhouse not go forward with the screening. Therefore, Russell and another individual who, upon information and belief, is a member of Kelly's inner circle, made efforts to determine if the screening was going forward. And this is where Cash Jones enters the scene, or Kavatne, or whatever her name is, enters the scene, okay? Specifically, at 6:59 p.m., a phone associated with a relative of the other inner circle individual called Newhouse. And I believe that would be Michael Williams, or either, okay, let's keep reading. 2 minutes later, at 7:01 p.m., a cell phone associated with Russell's phone called Newhouse. Moreover, between approximately 7:03 p.m. to 7:05 p.m., there was communication via text message and voice calls between the cell phone associated with Russell and the cell phone associated with the other inner circle individual. Most relevant, a call at approximately 7:04 p.m. A phone associated with Russell texted the other inner circle individual asking, "Are they continuing with the screening?" And the cell phone associated with the other person replied, "Yes." And so I believe that's the conversation between Don and Cash, who should also be indicted and also being sued. If we're going to be fair, if we're not playing games, if this isn't some great scheme that's going on, then Cash should be indicted as well. At all times relevant herein, Russell and Individual Corp was acting individually and as an apparent, ostensible, and or actual agent of all herein defendants, and that each defendant was this agent, representative, master, servant, employee, principal, joint venturer, enterprise, management company, and or representative of each of the remaining co-defendants, and in doing the acts alleged herein was acting within the course and scope of such agency, employment, joint venture, enterprise, agreement, management, company agreement, and or service with the approval, knowledge, authority, permission, and or consent of the remaining defendants. Which we already know is not true because the Eastern District of New York was unable to connect Don Russell's behavior to Robert Sylvester Kelly's case. The same way they were unable to connect Michael Williams burning up that rental car at Angelo Clary's home to an act of terrorism against Ariel Clary. Same as they were not able to connect Richard Arline and Ariel Clary's little bribery scheme to try and extort money from R. Kelly to R. Kelly. Okay? So moving right along to the next chapter, Russell calls the NYPD and the New York Fire Department in an effort to disrupt the screening. Okay, 126. When the cease and desist letter failed to prevent the screening, defendant Russell and other members of Kelly's inner circle, inclusive of defendants, continued in their effort to disrupt the scene. Alrighty, child. So we know that Don Russell was acting independently and he was no longer a part of any inner circle. If he was ever part of the inner circle, we know that he was just someone from Kelly's past who heard the song Admit or I Admit and decided to lend a helping hand. 127. Specifically, the following calls were made to law enforcement located at Newhouse. A. At approximately 7:14 p.m., the Individual Court phone called the number for the New York Police Department Midtown South Precinct, which is 1.4 miles away from Newhouse. B. At approximately 7:14 p.m., Russell's cell phone called the NYPD Transit District 4 Precinct, a precinct that is located approximately 0.6 miles away from Newhouse. Importantly, Russell attempted to conceal his misconduct by blocking his number by dialing star 67 prior to making the call. At approximately 7:23 p.m., the Individual Court phone called the Fire Bell Club of New York, an organization associated with the New York City Fire Department, located approximately 0.3 miles from Newhouse. At approximately 7:25 p.m., an Individual Court phone called the New York City Fire Department headquarters. At approximately 7:27 p.m., Russell called the Fire Bell Club of New York again. At approximately 7:27 p.m., Russell called 311, the state of New York's general number for non-emergency services. Can we say Don was doing entirely too much? And if you guys have already heard this before, it is because I read Don Russell's indictment in a previous video. And all of this that they are listing is just copy-paste from the indictment against Don Russell. So next section, Russell and Individual Court members of Kelly's inner circle make threatening calls to Newhouse executives, causing plaintiffs to be in great fear of their life and causing them emotional distress. And once again, Kelly had nothing to do with this. These people were not his inner circle. They were people like so many other people, as we have learned, who have tried to attach themselves to him, who have tried to get involved in this whole fight and just caused it to just explode into something that it didn't have to be, and the people would have just minded their own business, we wouldn't be where we are today. So 128, at approximately 7:36 p.m. and 7:37 p.m. on the same day, Russell called executives at Newhouse, threatening them by saying the cops may be arriving shortly and that someone at the screening had a gun and was going to shoot up the place. The Newhouse employee relayed the impending active shooter threats to the security guards working the event, as well as the manager of Newhouse and a 911 dispatcher. Plaintiffs both attended the screening and were present in the building while the threats of impending active shooter crime, catastrophe, and or emergency were being made, causing substantial amount of emotional fear and stress, trauma, and distress. Ultimately, the screening was canceled and the guests, inclusive of plaintiffs, were notified of the impending active shooter threat and evacuated from the scene, as they should have been. At approximately 8:05 p.m., Russell communicated the following message via text message to the other inner circle individual he had been working with to effectuate this crime. Delete those messages about 50. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Okay, in accord with Russell's criminal indictment, 50 means police officers, and he was likely referring to Russell's 7:37 p.m. text message stating the cops may be arriving shortly. According to the complaint, Russell deleted these messages from his phone prior to the time law enforcement seized his cell phone in July 2019. Defendants were ultimately successful in postponing the premiere on December 18, 2018 by convincing the owners of the establishment and those within it that someone in Newhouse had a gun and was going to shoot the place. Notably, horrifying threat came after several failed attempts to sabotage the screening and shocked the conscience so greatly that Newhouse was evacuated. The public disclosure of the intimate details of years of assault can sufficiently traumatize even the strongest survivor or the strongest whores. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. Okay, 138. Moreover, sexual assault affects the community. Therefore, individuals such as plaintiffs Jim Pratt and Roderick Guttrell, family members of a survivor, was chosen. They done went and rounded up some family members who say that they was traumatized because they cousins and sisters and aunties and whatever they nieces, whatever these heifers was to them, they were traumatized that they homegirls was out there spreading it wide and busting it open and flying all over the country getting fake boobs. And then when the man didn't want them no more, told them to hit the road, they were traumatized. Jim and Roderick was traumatized by that nonsense. Okay, 139. Particularly since he was tasked with handling the emotional distress he suffered as a result of this incident, but also trying to assist many of the ladies, inclusive of herein plaintiffs, from leaving the building. So standing up and being a man and walking somebody out the building caused you emotional distress. Because I'm sure when them people said that there was a gun, your ass probably was the first one to run out the door. Anyway, 140. Adding to that was the reasonable belief that they were all about to become the victim of a mass shooting. Would never see their children and or family members again, be killed and or permanently harmed is more than anyone should be expected to take. This is especially true because Kelly victims or groupies, inclusive of some of herein plaintiffs, were previously threatened, intimidated, harassed, and subjected into silence by Kelly and his inner circle, including Russell, notwithstanding the growing and constantly publicized gun violence. Oh, Lord Jesus. Y'all, I swear when I be reading this stuff to y'all, it's like I am reading a really horribly written grip. Like, they have really turned R. Kelly into like the big boogeyman. He was the candy man, y'all. He was the candy man that they just couldn't stay away from. Like, were they traumatized? I just want to know, were they traumatized when they were getting the fake boobs, the fake asses? Were they traumatized when they were wearing designer clothes, when they was getting $5,000 a month, when they're being flown across the country? Were they traumatized? Like, really, the only one that should have been traumatized was Faith, because Faith claimed she didn't know who R. Kelly was, that she wasn't a fan of him, but somehow she ended up turning up the cooch for him, flying all over the country, hounding him on the phone. And he didn't like her twat. He told her she didn't know how to, to move and to swerve and the curve. She didn't know how to satisfy him. So she probably did suffer some psychological damage, because I think when a man rejects you, that some women just can't take that, okay? And instead of her, watching some porn or something, trying to work on her moves, she just resorted to all of this and hasn't been able to move on with her life since then. But let's continue with the story, y'all. So 1:42, as they were being evacuated from the new house that night, plaintiffs were understandably terrified and exposed to and or suffered severe emotional distress. And as the threat was meant to terrorize, it was foreseeable that plaintiffs would have lasting trauma arising from the criminal act. Significantly, all defendants sought tirelessly to avoid what happened as a result of the airing of the Surviving Lies docudrama, which aired over the course of 3 nights from January 3rd, 2019 to January 5th, 2019. Shortly after the docudrama aired, Kelly's record label, RCA Jive Records, dissolved its working relationship with him, and in February 2019, Kelly was formally charged with 10 counts of aggravated criminal abuse. Now, didn't Jive Records go out of business a really long time ago? I don't think Jive Records is in existence anymore, is it? I could be wrong. 1:45. Moreover, Russell was indicted for this crime: conspiracy to threaten physical harm by interstate communication and other crimes revolving around his misconduct of intimidating other groupies of Kelly, as were other associates of Kelly. See complaint U.S. versus Russell. Now, I swear Don Russell is the only person in U.S. versus Russell, so I don't know who these other associates might be. All herein defendants are independently negligent and vicariously liable for acts and omissions of Russell as described herein. Although Russell was acting independently, I guess other people, just kind of like his thoughts transported into their minds, and because I don't know. But we're going to continue with the story, y'all. At all relevant times, Kelly, RSK Enterprise LLC, and IndieBill Corp. had actual and or legal authority over Russell and are legally liable for his wrongful, negligent, unlawful acts as described more fully herein. Okay, first of all, RSK Enterprise is the LLC. It is not a human being, so therefore it has no authority over Don Russell. IndieBill Corp. has no authority over Don Russell. Don Russell owns IndieBill Corp. Therefore, Don Russell has authority over IndieBill. And then R. Kelly didn't know about none of this was going on. Don Russell was not his employee, and he did not instruct Don Russell to do any of this. And because Don Russell decided to do it, it's not on R. Kelly. It has nothing to do with him. But we shall continue. At all times relevant hereto, Russell and IndieBill Corp. were employed by and an agent thereof defendants for the common purpose of promoting, protecting, and increasing the viability and commercial success of the R. Kelly brand, which all defendants profited from, which included acts to silence, intimidate, threaten, and harass plaintiffs. Okay, who are all defendants? We have nobody but Don Russell, and Don Russell did not work for R. Kelly or the R. Kelly brand. Like, what part of that don't they understand? Upon information and belief, each defendant, whether specifically named or designated herein, was the agent, representative, master, servant, employee, principal. joint venturer, enterprise, management company, and or representative of each of the remaining co-defendants, and in doing the acts alleged herein, was acting within the course and scope of such agency, employment, joint venture, enterprise, agreement, management company, agreement, and or service with the approval, knowledge, authority, permission, and or consent. Lord Jesus, this is just too many words that mean nothing. Too many words that mean nothing, y'all. All right, so we on to number 150. Somebody had too much damn time on their hands when they wrote this. At all relevant times herein, all herein defendants had the power and right to exercise control over the actions, inactions, and conduct of Russell. Actually, they didn't, because they didn't know what Don Russell was up to. At all relevant times herein, all herein defendants also delegated responsibility for various tasks, including inter alia, perpetually seeking to silence any individuals, inclusive of plaintiffs, who sought to reveal the truth about Kelly's criminal, abusive, unlawful conduct. Oh, Lord. At all relevant times herein, the wrongful, negligent, unlawful acts as described more fully herein were in furtherance of Russell's employ and or all herein defendants' common purpose to preserve the reputation of defendants and the R. Kelly brand. At all relevant times herein, all defendants made concerted efforts to effect this common purpose, and all herein defendants have equal rights to direct, to control the other defendants, as all herein defendants acted in concert via cooperation, ratification, encouragement, or actual concurring conduct, and or formed the common plan to engage in and or participated in, authorized and or directed the very unlawful conduct that was litigation arises from. Do y'all need a break? Because I really don't know what else they got to say for another 22 pages, but we're gonna tarry on. We're gonna keep reading this nonsense. Moreover, defendants' unlawful misconduct was in line with and or a part of the normal course of performance of what all herein defendants expected and repeatedly engaged in. The judge really should throw this out, because it's just a bunch of babbling bull crap. At all relevant times, all herein defendants acted as agents for one another and ratified Russell's and the other defendants' actions, inactions, and conduct, and were acting in furtherance of the business or purpose of preserving Kelly's Indie Bill Corp. And RSK's reputation and the R. Kelly brand are more fully described herein. Okay. But for the concerted efforts of all herein defendants towards the averred common purpose, this action would not have occurred. At all relevant times herein, all herein defendants could reasonably anticipate the unlawful acts and omissions of defendants as more fully described herein. So now people got telepathy. They can read minds across state lines to know what somebody about to do. Okay, this is further evidence in the criminal complaints lodged against Kelly, Russell, Michael Williams, and Richard Arline Jr., other agents and or members of Kelly's inner circle. Child, now let me tell y'all something. Like I said before, Michael Williams and Richard Arline and Don Russell have not been proven to be connected to R. Kelly. Has not been proven at all. So that alone, the point number 158 should be reason enough for this whole bogus lawsuit to be tossed out, because they're just making up stuff at this point. 3 individuals within R. Kelly's enterprise was arrested for separate schemes to harass, threaten, intimidate, and bribe other survivors of Kelly. 3 individuals that he did not direct to do anything. 2 of which, well, we know he didn't know Michael Williams, because Michael Williams was sentenced to 8 years in prison because he said he didn't know R. Kelly. R. Kelly didn't tell him to do any of this. And basically, Michael Williams was being manipulated by Cash Jones, who seems to be coming out of this whole situation squeaky clean, not being connected or named in any of this stuff. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So on August 11, 2020, 3 separate criminal complaints were filed in federal court in Brooklyn, New York, charging 3 close friends and associates of Kelly. Oh, Lord have mercy. Close friends, y'all, and associates. Richard R. Lyne Jr., Russell, and Michael Williams with crimes related to their efforts to harass, intimidate, threaten, or corrupt individuals named as alleged victims in the racketeering case against Kelly. Once again, okay, alleged. I'm glad y'all still calling them alleged victims, because we know they ain't no damn victims. 160, as Homeland Security Special Agent in Charge Peter C. Fitzhugh unequivocally stated, "These crimes shock the conscience. The men charged today allegedly have shown that there is no line they will not cross to help Kelly avoid the consequences of his alleged crimes, even if it means re-victimizing his groupies. These acts not only fly in the face of human decency, they insult the very rule of law. HSI will continue to bring the full force of our investigative powers to pursue those seeking to attack witnesses and pervert the cause of justice. To the victims of these and other crimes, we stand with you. We will meet your bravery with our resolve to keep you safe to tell your story." And that was a press release for 3 individuals arrested for separate schemes to harass, threaten, intimidate, and bribe alleged R. Kelly victims. Department of Justice, United States Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York, August 12, 2020. The bribery, intimidation, and violence alleged in these complaints reflect a nationwide pattern of criminality that further victimized civilian witnesses in a federal case. Such behavior can never be accepted, and I commend the New York Police Department investigators, federal agents, and prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York in bringing these charges, stated New York Police Department Commissioner Shea. Okay, Lord. United States versus Russell. For the record, we're at point 162. Russell was charged with using the mail, the internet, and cellular telephones to cause emotional distress to Faith Rogers and Kelly Rogers by harassing and intimidating them. See affidavit in support of arrest, U.S. versus Russell, Eastern District of New York, 2020. As alleged in the complaint, between November 2018 and February 2020, Russell, a self-pronounced manager, advisor, and friend of Kelly, used the mail, telephones, and the internet to harass and intimidate Faith Rogers, a groupie in the Kelly case, and Kelly Rogers, her mammy, after Faith Rogers Kelly Rogers, her mother, after Faith Rogers filed a civil lawsuit against Kelly. Specifically, Russell threatened to reveal sexually explicit photographs of Faith Rogers and to publicly reveal her sexual history if she did not withdraw her lawsuit against Kelly and cease her participation and association with the organizers of a negative campaign against Kelly. In November 2018, Russell caused a letter with attachments purportedly written by Kelly to be mailed to Faith Rogers' Brooklyn-based lawyer at the time. The attachment included cropped nude photographs of Faith Rogers with the following text: "The next 2 pictures have been cropped for the sake of not exposing her extremities to the world." And just so you guys know that these pictures that they're talking about are actually pictures that Faith Rogers took of herself and sent to R. Kelly. Okay. In December 2018, Russell, using his alias Don, sent a series of text messages to Faith Rogers and her mother, Kelly Rogers, which contained the same photographs of Faith Rogers, stating, "Just a sample. We will see criminal charges. You've been warned," as well as publishing soon "This is Colin." So he signed his name to the damn text message. Okay. So on January 3rd, 2019, Russell allegedly sent additional text messages to Faith and Kelly Rogers, stating, "Pull the plug or you will be exposed." And then also Don Russell. So I think R. Kelly sent the pictures to Don's mother, June, and June sent the pictures to Don. I believe that's how this went. R. Kelly didn't know what they were going to. I think the pictures were supposed to have been used in the letter, the cease and desist letter that went to the now convict lawyer that was representing Faith Rogers. But somehow June sent the pictures to Don Russell, and then Don Russell went on with this scheme about, creating the website and the Facebook page and all this stuff using this information, if I'm remembering correctly from the trial. Let's see. On January 6, 2019, Russell, using the Colin Don alias, created a Facebook page named Surviving Lies, a play on the title of Lifetime Surviving Lies docudrama, and posted screenshots of text messages between Kelly and Faith Rogers, which contained the same sexually explicit photographs of the young woman. And then let's also keep in mind that Faith Rogers is known for posting sexually explicit photos of herself across social media, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. So in late January 2020, Russell appeared on 2 live interviews with vloggers discussing Kelly's legal troubles, which were streamed live on the internet via YouTube. Russell again displayed the same pictures of Faith Rogers and broadcasted them publicly over the internet. However, we had already seen the pictures, so it was nothing new. United States versus Michael Williams. Now, what this got to do with anything, I don't know. But anyway, let's move on. Michael Williams, and we're at point 171 in this book. Michael Williams is another close associate of Kelly. Michael Williams is someone who does not know R. Kelly, has never met R. Kelly. Michael Williams is the cousin of Cash Jones, Cavante Jones, who manipulated her cousin into involving himself in this drama, and he is now serving 8 years in prison for getting involved in something that had absolutely nothing to do with him. But he thought he was helping his cousin, who is not named in this indictment or this lawsuit. Just to be clear, Cash is not named as a defendant, although she should be. Williams was charged with using and attempting to use intimidation and threats against an alleged groupie she wasn't alleged, she was a groupie in the Kelly case, with intent to influence, delay, and prevent her testimony in the Kelly case. Affidavit in support of arrest warrant, U.S. versus Williams. But we already know that Williams was not trying to intimidate Ariel Clary, who is not a part of this. So why is this even in here? But Williams was trying to intimidate Angelo Clary, who was allegedly having an affair with Cash Jones, had them piss Cash off, and Cash sent her cousin to blow up this car, that was leased through Enterprise by Angelo Clary. This car was not associated with Ariel Clary. So the complaint also charges Williams with maliciously damaging and destroying a vehicle by means of fire and explosives. As alleged in Williams' complaint on or about June 11, 2020, Williams, a relative of an individual who once served as a publicist for Kelly, which is not true, she was not his publicist, set fire to an SUV parked outside a residence in Florida where a groupie in the Kelly case and others were staying. The vehicle, leased by the victim's father, was heavily damaged. Fire investigators also detected an accelerant along the outside perimeter of the residence. cell site records, surveillance footage, toll records, photographs, and Williams' internet searches for the groupie's address revealed that Williams had driven from Georgia to the Florida residence with intent to cause damage. Williams also performed internet searches about the detonation properties of fertilizer and diesel fuel, witness intimidation and witness tampering, and countries that do not have extradition with the United States. And if you guys watch my video on the sentencing of Michael Williams, I state in that video that this man did not seem to have the intelligence to have done 75% of the stuff that they claimed they had evidence of him doing, like the internet searches and, extradition laws. Because where the hell was he going? Okay. I believe, it's my belief, that Cash Jones had this man's phone and was creating this evidence trail because she is a part of this whole setup. And so she set her cousin up big time because she preyed on the fact that he was a caring individual, someone that would do anything to help his family and friends. His father, he had received several letters from people in the community and people that know him that talked about, his contributions, and that, he's just a person that gets in trouble trying to help other people when he needs to be minding his own business and taking care of himself and his family. And so I just really believe that Cash preyed on her cousin and got him involved in this situation when this man should have been home with his family minding his own business. So then they move on to United States versus Arline. Arline Jr. was charged with attempting to unlawfully persuade the testimony of the alleged groupie in the Kelly's case, identified in the complaint as Jane Doe, who we know is Ariel Clary, and engaging in misleading conduct towards the victim with intent to influence, delay, and prevent her testimony in the Kelly case. Affidavit in support of arrest warrant U.S. versus Arline. In addition, he was charged with bribing the victim with something of value with the intent to influence her testimony as a witness upon a trial, hearing, and or other proceeding. As alleged in Arline's complaint between January 9, 2020 and June 2020, Arline Jr., a self-proclaimed longtime friend, self-proclaimed because it was never proven that he was a friend of Kelly's, attempted to illegally influence the cooperation and testimony of Clary in the Kelly case. After learning of Arline Jr.'s plan, Clary contacted law enforcement and, under the supervision of law enforcement authorities, continued to communicate with him. During a series of consensually recorded telephone calls, as well as in-calls and text messages captured pursuant to a judicially authorized wiretap, Arline Jr. discussed a scheme in which Clary would receive compensation, including a proposed payment of $500,000 to keep her from cooperating with the government. Once again, this was all a scheme, okay, because Arline didn't have $500,000, nor did he have access to $500,000. And then in this whole scheme with the government, he attempted to lure other people like Keith, who I can't think of Keith's name right off the bat, but he's the one that has control of Kelly's legal affairs. So they tried to lure these other people into this scheme and trap them to force them to testify on the government's behalf, but nobody fell for the scheme, and the scheme fell apart. And then he testified, or he gave information. He did testify. So part of his deal, his plea agreement, he ended up testifying in Kelly's case with this story about when he was 17, he met Kelly at the McDonald's and he ended up having sex with Kelly. Well, he didn't have sex with him. I think there was some oral sex that went on. And then he talked about a lady coming from under a boxing ring. And if you followed the Kelly case and listened to the transcript readings, you know that a lot of the stuff that these people were up there talking about were scenes out of music videos, were scenes out of music, out of music was stuff that came because Cass Jones wrote a book. Like, this all started with this book that she wrote, and then other people emulated the book that she wrote, and then some of the stuff that was in the book people claimed happened to them, and then got on the witness stand. It was basically telling stories from music videos, books that had been written, and all this other nonsense. Like, you can't make this stuff up. This actually happened to this man, and he is now facing life in prison behind some dumb BS. Whew, but we're going to move on, y'all. So during one of the recorded telephone calls, Arline claimed that he had communicated with Kelly via a three-way phone call with another individual while Kelly was incarcerated. The intercepted communication also include Arline Jr. discussing plans to pay Ariel to be quiet, explaining that if I had a way to talk to Rob, being next to him and telling him what's going on without nobody listening to, no feds, nobody, he gonna pay her off to be quiet because she got too much. She got too much. She who got too much had to sit with the prosecutors for 60 hours leading up to her testimony to rehearse what she was going to say. So obviously she didn't have that much. So all identified defendants worked together to promote Kelly's music and the R. Kelly brand and to recruit women and girls, blah, 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 blah. By promoting Kelly's music and the brand, defendants expected and did receive financial opportunities and personal benefits, including increased power and status. So please tell us what Arline, Williams, and Russell, what did they accomplish? What did they receive as a result? So this is the kind of stuff that their lawyers are going to be able to tear down and be like, what did they receive? Show us proof that they received anything in exchange for the dumb stuff that they did. So now we're on point 188. Kelly relied heavily on defendants to one, travel, recruit, and solicit. So we're going to tell that whole, they didn't say it this about 3 times in this document, so ain't no need in reading this. 189, Kelly's inner circle, which consists of individuals. They done wrote that already. We're going to read that again. 190, plaintiffs seek punitive damages against Russell for malicious and or intentional wanton and reckless acts and omissions described herein. Well, good luck with that, because according to Sharon Wimbush, Don Russell is unemployed, and prior to his arrest, he was a manager at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles in California. So I don't know what y'all gonna get out of Don Russell, because it don't seem like he owns anything. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next chapter. First cause of action: negligence, recklessness, gross negligence against all defendants. Plaintiffs restates and incorporates by reference all allegations contained herein as though fully set forth and brought in the cause of action. 192. Defendants, individually and or by and through their agent, representative, servant, employee, principal, joint venture, management company, and or representative, intentionally and or for the purpose of causing severe emotional distress, recklessly acted in a manner that was so shocking and outrageous that it exceeded all reasonable bounds of decency towards plaintiffs, therein causing them severe emotional distress, all as a direct result of defendants' unlawful conduct that give rise to this lawsuit. Defendants directly and or indirectly engaged in unpermitted, harmful, threatening, wrongful, lawful, and offensive harassment and conduct therein harming plaintiffs herein in violation of federal and state law, placing plaintiffs in imminent apprehension of death and or severe and substantial bodily injury conduct. The various accusations of assault against Kelly and the publication of docudrama Surviving Lies regarding the accusations of assault represented a clear threat to R. Kelly's commercial viability and defendants' commercial interests and ability to further its common purpose to inter alia protect Kelly, other herein defendants, and the brand. Now that is partially true, because y'all coming out with that docu-live could and did harm his image and his commercial interest and his ability to make money, because remember, y'all cut off his cash flow. So I don't know what cash y'all coming for now, because y'all made it a point, went out of your way to stop this man's earning potential. Remember the whole mute R. Kelly movement? Y'all were a part of that. So what is y'all trying to sue for now? What is it y'all trying to get? Y'all were a part of a whole docudrama filled with lies and allegations that ruined this man and landed him in prison. What in the HELL do y'all think y'all about to get at this point? The stupidity of it all. But anyway, let's move on. 195. Accordingly, Russell was acting in accordance with defendant's commercial interests by intimidating witnesses to undermine their allegations and protect Kelly and the R. Kelly brand misconduct defendants foresaw, knew, or should have known would occur and or directed either directly or indirectly. Pre-existing allegations against Russell, such as inter alia sending a cease and desist letter and being arrested for previously intimidating another groupie for the same action, demonstrate that defendants knew or should have been on notice that Russell, Kelly, and other identified defendants were engaged in these activities. Who should have been on notice? Anyway, 197. Said misconduct was undertaken while Russell was an employee, joint venturer, agent, servant, and affiliate of defendants, while in the course and scope of said employment, of which he was not employed, agency, affiliation, joint venture, or servitude, whether actual or apparent. So it just appeared that he was. Okay. With defendants and or the actions of defendant, Russell was ratified by defendants after they knew or should have known that defendant Russell had and or would continue to engage in misconduct. Child, please. Okay, all defendants are liable for the acts of defendant Russell prior to defendant's misconduct. Like, that's just like saying that because Don Russell sat next to a drunk on the bench before getting on the subway, that drunk should have known that Don Russell was getting on the subway to go to New York to do whatever he did. So therefore, the drunk on the bench is also liable. So y'all need to throw him into this document as well. So defendants, by and through their agents, servants, and employees, inclusive of defendant Russell, knew or reasonably should have known of defendant Russell's dangerous and exploitative person. Propensities. Defendants had an obligation, responsibility, and duty under the law not to hide material facts and information about Russell's past and current misconduct and his dangerous propensities, given inter alia his status as an employee, joint venturer, agent, servant, and or affiliate of defendants, for which he was not. 202. Additionally, defendants had an affirmative duty to inform, warn, and institute appropriate protective measures to safeguard foreseeable plaintiffs' life. Maybe if the plaintiffs had went on about their lives, had not been a part of the docu-lies, had not been a part of the takedown, had not been a part of this fake documentary. Maybe if they had gone and got a job, become productive citizens, all of this would have been avoided. But instead, they were in their feelings. They thought they were going to make some money, and boom, everything just blew up in their face. It didn't turn out the way that they thought it was going to turn out. And why aren't your plaintiffs suing Lifetime and A&E, for selling them a fake bill of goods, for telling them that they were going to make all this money on tours and likeness and their images and all of this stuff, when it was a bunch of BS, and the only people that have made money off of this whole thing is Lifetime and not your plaintiffs. Maybe your plaintiffs need to be suing the network for false representation and for selling them a fake bill of goods, because that's where they're going to get the most money from. Because it was Lifetime that made a mockery out of their stories and what they claimed happened to them. But let's move on. 204. Defendant Russell's acts were a foreseeable and anticipated act which was known to defendants, which it was not. 205. Defendants were put on notice, knew and or should have known that defendant Russell had previously engaged in and was continuing to engage in for defendant's common purpose and benefit, and that it was foreseeable that he was engaging or would engage or would continue to engage in unlawful acts in furtherance of protecting defendants and the R. Kelly brand. Okay, well, good luck proving all of this. Defendants acted individually and on behalf of other defendants with authority bestowed upon them through defendants, their agents, servants, employees, affiliates, and or students. Lord, how we done got the students? Who was in school, y'all? Who are the students that y'all mentioning here? They just running out of words to use. They just done open up the dictionary and just grabbing words and throwing it on the paper at this point. Defendants were put on notice and should have known that Russell had previously engaged and continued. Okay, you done already said this a million times. Oh, Lord. Defendants and his agents, servants, and employees failed to take reasonable steps to avoid acts of unlawful misconduct by Russell, who just happens to be a grown-ass man with his own mind, his own ability to act independently of anybody else. Furthermore, at no time during the periods of time alleged did defendants warn any foreseeable plaintiffs, including plaintiffs. Maybe they didn't know. Moreover, incidents of misconduct, specifically the intimidation, harassment, and threatening misconduct by defendants and their agents, named and unnamed, were neither isolated nor unusual. How about you name the unnamed people, because we will know who they are too. Defendants' negligence and recklessness further lies in having placed defendant Russell in a position to cause foreseeable harm of which plaintiffs suffered. Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, can we start naming who defendants are? Y'all like keep throwing that word defendants out there. Just say who you mean. Stop talking in riddles. Who you mean by defendants, okay? Okay, 212. Defendants, once again, owed to plaintiffs of duty to aid and or protect against its employees, agents, servants, affiliates, joint ventures, and or independent contractors as set forth in Restatement Second of Torts and other relevant sections. And once again, we say, had the groupies just went on with their lives, had chalked it up to the game, said, I got my fake boobs, I got my fake body, I got my Gucci, my Prada, I got my trips across the country, and it just didn't work out, and went on and got a job. Because see, when they was getting that money for all this cosmetic surgery, the clothing and everything, they should have been getting money for a college education so that they could become boss bitches, okay? So that they could have become doctors and lawyers and all of that stuff. And then maybe they could have been an asset to the defendant in growing his brand, which would have put more money in their pockets. Instead, they're out here groveling on the ground with lawsuits, hoping that they're about to make some money, which they'll probably spend over the next 2 years if they actually get some money. And then in a couple of years, they'll be back at ground zero trying to figure out who they're going to extort to get their next financial endowment to cover them for the next 2 years. But at this point, their brand is so bruised that nobody with money would dare touch any of them. So there you go. But we're going to continue to read this book y'all done put out for us. So defendants owed to plaintiffs a duty to control the acts of its employees, agents, servants, and or those known to engage in torturous or negligent misconduct. Defendants, and then this is 214, defendants' negligence. Defendants' negligence, recklessness, and outrageous conduct through its agents consisted of the following. A. Failure to act in Russell's and or herein defendants' prior acts of threat and intimidation. B. Failure to prevent Russell's and other therein defendants' 2018 threat. C. Failure to recognize abuse of women. So now they psychologists, y'all. So they failed to recognize abuse in these fools despite a number of allegations dating back to the 1990s, and instead working to facilitate these and other unlawful acts. D. Possession of information but consciously disregarding said information that put defendant on notice that Russell and other herein defendants were aiding Kelly in abusing women. Now they talking in circle, child. Who is the defendants? We don't know who these people are that y'all talking about that allowed this to happen. Because 1 minute you act like the defendant is Kelly. Now you're talking about other defendants that we don't know exist. And I guess, are you talking about the LLCs? So the LLCs should have known that this was going on. I mean, make it make sense to me. E. Possession of information but consciously disregarding said information that put defendant on notice that Russell and other herein defendants were threatening and intimidating witnesses against Kelly. F. Failure to use reasonable care under the circumstances. And G. Other negligent and reckless acts that may be learned from information currently and solely in the possession of defendants. They could have ended this about 10 pages ago, but we're going to continue to read it, because I read a bad novel to get to the end in hopes that it get better. Most times it don't, but, I continue to read it. Okay, 215. Yes, we're at point 215 of gibberish. These failures included, but are not limited to the following. A. Fostering an environment where criminal misconduct was a normal course of his agents, like Russell, performance obligations. B. Failure to act properly and diligently and not consciously disregarded or minimize unlawful misconduct. C. Failure to notify foreseeable plaintiffs, like plaintiffs and or other appropriate authorities. D. Failure to follow up with and protect foreseeable plaintiffs, like plaintiffs after clear indica or anticipated harm. I guess they wanted folks to be psychics, know what people doing in other side of the country. Okay. 216. Moreover, excuse me, y'all. Okay. Moreover, the negligent, reckless, intentional, outrageous, deliberate, and or reckless indifference and unlawful conduct of defendants as set forth above and herein further consisted of. Now watch, they say the same thing they done said 10 times before in this document. A. Permitting agents, including defendant Russell, to harm foreseeable plaintiffs, including plaintiffs and other acts of nonfeasance. B. Breaching the duties imposed by Restatement Second of Torts 324A and other relevant statutes as adopted in New York. C. Failing to warn scores of foreseeable plaintiffs, including plaintiffs, of the risk of harm posed by defendant Russell and other herein defendants after defendants knew or should have known of such risk. D. Violation of duties imposed by Restatement Second of Agency Section 213 and Restatement Second of Torts Section 317 and other relevant sections as adopted in New York. E. Failing to warn plaintiffs of the risk of harm that foreseeable may suffer because of the misconduct of defendant Russell and herein defendants. F. Negligently managing, associating with, and or operating defendants that they knew or should have known was unfit and or dangerous. G. Failing to notify and or warn foreseeable plaintiffs, including plaintiffs. Okay, well, let's just put it this way, since we won't talk about what people should have foreseen. Maybe Mr. Kelly should have foreseen that these groupies were going to be trouble down the line and that they were going to wreak havoc on his life. And had he foreseen that women that would just show up at your concert, come backstage, then call you asking for plane tickets to fly across the country within days, probably ain't somebody that you want to be risking your future on. Maybe he should have foreseen, that because they were so easy to give it up in dressing rooms and bike rooms and in sprinter vans, that maybe they weren't worth the trouble. Maybe he should have foreseen that in these plaintiffs. And then all of this would be null and void. 217. The negligence and recklessness of defendants directly and proximately caused the injuries and damages to plaintiffs described herein, including, or maybe the negligence and recklessness of the plaintiffs directly and proximately caused their own damages and injuries. Maybe. I'm just saying, everybody got a brain. Some of us need to use them, okay? A, failing to take responsible and necessary steps to recuse plaintiffs after their failures place plaintiffs in a perilous position. And we could reword this and say that the plaintiffs failed to take reasonable and necessary steps to protect their virtue, okay, and not put themselves in harm's way. B, failing to exercise reasonable and necessary steps to prevent further harm. We could say that about the plaintiffs, that they failed to exercise reasonable and take necessary steps to not be groupies and to get a real job and build a future for themselves. C, failing to take reasonable and necessary steps to give aid or assistance to plaintiffs. Well, if they had taken reasonable and necessary steps, they wouldn't have needed aid or assistance, now would they? D, violation of the duties set forth in Restatement Second of Torts, Section 314A, 321, and or 322. And guys, after I post this video, I am going to look up this Restatement Second of Torts and do a video explaining to you all exactly what that is. 218. Defendants knew or should have known about the harm Russell and other herein defendants intended and had a duty to protect those foreseeable plaintiffs like plaintiffs. Okay, so let's reword this. The plaintiffs should have known about the harm that they could have been causing themselves by becoming groupies. Because I don't think it's easy being a groupie. I mean, like, you can't really have a job, can you? You can't have a real job. You can't really be enrolled in college because you got to be ready to jump on a plane and fly to wherever you're going so that you can do groupie things, right? So maybe they had a duty to protect themselves. Maybe they should have evaluated the risk of being groupies. Okay? But anyway, we're going to follow along. 219. Despite the fact that defendants knew or should have known about the harm Russell and other herein defendants intended to the foreseeable plaintiffs, they failed to exercise the ordinary care of reasonable and prudent individual. Nobody was responsible for protecting these heifers. They should have been protecting themselves, okay? 220. Defendants had a duty to use reasonable care to protect others, including groupies, from known or foreseeable danger. 221. Defendants breached their duty of care to plaintiffs by inter alia ratifying Russell's and other herein defendants and or members of Kelly's inner circle. Child, nobody was thinking about these chicks, okay? Past acts of misconduct and cooperating, encouraging future acts. Nobody was thinking about that. Nobody was intimidating, harassing, or silencing anybody because they didn't care about the plaintiffs, who could bring the truth of the horrific allegations of Kelly's misconduct that defendants sought to cover up. There was no, oh Lord Jesus, I can't. Are we almost done? Are we there yet? 222. As a direct and proximate consequence of the negligence, carelessness, recklessness, willful and wanton conduct of defendants as described more fully herein, plaintiffs were harmed sexually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. No, they weren't. 223. The injuries suffered by plaintiffs are substantial, severe, or continuing. No, they're not. 224. Defendants knowing acquiescence and silence with respect to the known or reasonably knowable activities of Russell and other herein defendants and others associated with and or affiliated with defendants, including those in Kelly's inner circle, engaged in the continuing course of conduct through which acts of intimidation, perversion, assault, and or abuse were committed against many individuals, including foreseeable plaintiffs like plaintiffs, which were condoned, approved, and effectively authorized and ratified by defendants. No, they weren't. 225. Defendants acted with a common purpose and pursuit to a common design and conspired to endanger the safety and welfare of scores of foreseeable groupies, including these groupies. No, they didn't. 226. Defendants conspired to promote an unsafe and unhealthy condition, which ultimately resulted in plaintiff suffering and injuries of damages stated herein. That's a bunch of lies, because these heifers was living pretty good. 227. I mean, they were living better than most other groupies. Y'all have to admit to that. 227. The collective failure to prevent this extreme and outrageous and unlawful misconduct amounted to common purpose and design, unified for the purpose of 1, permitting the criminal conduct to occur. There was no criminal conduct. 2, evading appropriate legal authority for unlawful conduct. And 3, continuing great profit and financial and reputational stature, which we know is a lie because the man's career was ruined and he was arrested and ultimately convicted in a staged courtroom drama. Okay, 228. Through defendants' failures to timely reprimand, terminate, report, and or sanction defendants' acts for all of the other reasons set forth in this complaint, including, without limitation, defendants' failure to take the steps necessary to prevent the occurrence of such reprehensible acts, defendants ratified said actions of defendant Russell and other herein defendants and members of Kelly's inner circle, and accordingly are vicariously and otherwise liable for the actions of defendant Russell. 229. Defendant Russell, in harassing, intimidating, and threatening plaintiffs and others, intended to subject foreseeable groupies, including groupies, to harm, during which time Russell acted in the course and scope of his agency, employment, and or affiliation with defendants, and each defendant intended to cause harmful or offensive contacts with groupies, persons, or intended to put groupies in imminent apprehension of such contact. Whew, y'all giving yourself a whole lot of importance and relevance. 230. In doing the things herein stated, plaintiffs were put in imminent apprehension of a harmful and or offensive contact by defendants and knew or should have known that defendant Russell and other herein defendants had the ability to make harmful or offensive contact with each groupie person. Plaintiffs did not and could not consent to defendant Russell and other herein defendants' intended harmful or offensive conduct or intent to put groupies in imminent apprehension of such contact. Yes, they could have. They could have got on with their life when they were dismissed. 232. And actually, they could have just not been involved in this nonsense and they might have still been able to be groupies. But they wanted to do dirt and bring harm, and this was the result. Okay, 232. In so doing, Russell and defendants violated federal and New York state penal laws and plaintiffs' rights for protection from threats of immediate bodily restraint or harm and from personal insult. 233. In doing so, defendants violated their duty to abstain from injuring the person or groupies or infringing upon their rights. Defendants' conduct in allowing, permitting, ratifying, and or failing to prevent criminal contact between defendant Russell and other herein defendants and foreseeable plaintiffs, groupies, including groupies, constitutes per se violations of the federal and state law and other codes. Further, defendant Russell and other herein defendants were permitted and enabled to commit these criminal acts as a direct and proximate result of the negligence, carelessness, and wanton recklessness of defendants and that of its agent, servant, affiliates, and or employees through other acts and omissions, including their failure to take sufficient, if any, disciplinary action against Russell, who is a grown-ass man, other members of the inner circle, and other herein defendants. As a direct result of the conduct described herein, plaintiffs suffered substantial, severe, and continuing harm, described herein. 237. Defendant's conduct was oppressive, malicious, and despicable in that it was intentional and or done in conscious regard for the rights and safety of others and carried out with a conscious disregard of groupies' rights to be free from such torturous and or negligent misbehavior such as to constitute oppression, fraud, or malice, entitling groupies to punitive damages against defendants in an amount appropriate to punish and deter others. I would say give them $1 each and a bus ride home. 238. 238. Groupies were owed by each of the defendants a duty to be protected from harm inflicted upon groupies by all herein defendants. Groupies were owed by each of defendants a duty to be protected from increased risk of known harm as inflicted upon groupies by defendants and set in motion by defendants. It was reasonably foreseeable that those employees and agents of defendants, including defendant Russell, would engage in conduct inclusive or criminal conduct in furtherance of the common purpose of protecting Kelly, other herein defendants, and the brand. It was reasonably foreseeable that defendants breached the duty of care owed to groupies as a direct result of the conduct mentioned herein. Groupies suffered substantial, severe, and or permanent harm as described herein. 242. As a result of the herein acts, omissions, and misconduct, groupies have suffered and continue to suffer great pain of mind and body, shock, emotional distress, physical manifestations of emotional distress, embarrassment, loss of self-esteem, disgrace, humiliation, and loss of enjoyment of life, been prevented and will continue to be prevented from performing groupies' daily activities and obtaining the full enjoyment of life, sustained and will continue to sustain loss of earnings and earning capacity, and or has instructed and will continue to incur expenses for medical and psychological treatment, therapy, and counseling. Well, they brought this on themselves because true groupies would have just moved on to the next rich, famous person and would not have tried this to exploit anyone or humiliate the person that had dismissed them or allowed them to walk away or wouldn't let them come back after they had walked away. 243. As a proximate result of defendants' acts, including those acts of enabling and or ratifying Russell's and other herein defendants' acts, groupies are entitled to actual damages, compensatory damages, punitive damages, injunction relief, legal disbursements, legal fees, and any combination of those or any other appropriate appropriate relief against all defendants. 244. Accordingly, compensatory and punitive damages and legal fees, costs, and disbursements and other damages are necessary under these facts as to all defendants. Wherefore, groupies praise for a jury trial and for judgment against defendants for injunctive, compensatory, and punitive damages and any other costs, amounts of which exceed the jurisdictional limits of all lower courts. Second cause of action, negligent infliction of emotional distress against all defendants. 245. Groupies restate and incorporate by reference each and every allegation contained herein above as though fully set forth and brought in this cause of action. Defendants owed a duty to use reasonable care in conduct regarding the health, safety, and rights of groupies. It was foreseeable and probable that groupies would suffer harm and or severe emotional distress from defendants' acts, omissions, and unlawful conduct. Defendants owed a duty to these foreseeable groupies to not cause groupies harms and or emotional distress, injuries, or which were foreseeable. It was reasonably foreseeable that individuals, including those employees and agents of defendants, including defendant Russell and other herein defendants, would engage in the acts, omissions, and misconduct described more fully herein. Defendants by and through each entity's respective agents, servants, and or employees had actual knowledge, knew, or reasonably should have known of defendant Russell's and other herein defendants' dangerous propensities, and or that defendant Russell and other herein defendants were unfit and or likely to engage in criminal misconduct. Despite such knowledge, defendants each breached their duty to provide reasonable supervision of defendant Russell, who just happens to be a grown-ass man, and or warn foreseeable groupies like groupies. Okay, 252. Defendants were negligent by breaching the care they owed to the groupies when their staff, agents, and employees like Russell and other herein defendants repeatedly abused, harassed, or threatened the groupies, and when members were within the inner circle threatened and harassed executives in an effort to prevent the screening of surviving lies, and defendants were aware of such unlawful misconduct and allowed it to continue. At all relevant times, defendant Russell and or herein defendants were acting in the course and scope of their employ and or in furtherance of a common purpose, whether actual or apparent, with defendants to protect Kelly, other herein defendants, and the Kelly brand. By employing and or promoting defendant Russell and other herein defendants subjected groupies to harassment, intimidation, and unreasonable fear of death and imminent harm at the hands. Oh my God, they are being so dramatic of defendant Russell and other herein defendants directly and or indirectly. Okay, so basically they're just saying the same thing over and over. Defendant used herein each co-defendant as vehicles of his continued torture and abuse of young women, including some groupies. Defendants consciously took no action against Kelly and instead acted to conceal Kelly's conduct from the public, such as efforts made to prevent the screening of surviving lies. Groupies suffered substantial, severe, and or continuing emotional distress. Defendants' acts, omissions, and unlawful misconduct were a substantial factor in causing plaintiffs harm or groupies harm and or severe emotional distress. 259. As a direct result of the conduct described herein, the groupies suffered substantial, severe, or permanent harm as described herein. 260, y'all. As a result of the above described conduct, the groupies have suffered and continue to suffer great pain of mind and body, shock, emotional distress, physical manifestations of emotional distress, embarrassment, loss of self-esteem, disgrace, humiliation, and loss of enjoyment of life. They didn't lose no self-esteem because they obviously had no self-esteem, or they would have never put themselves in this position. But I shall continue. Been prevented and will continue to be prevented from performing the groupies' daily activities and obtaining the full enjoyment of life, which sustained and will continue to sustain loss of earnings and earning capacity. They never had an earning capacity. And or has instructed and will continue to incur expenses for medical and psychological treatment, therapy, and counseling as they should. 261. As approximate result of defendants' acts, the groupies are entitled to actual damages, compensatory damages, punitive damages, injunctive relief, legal disbursements, legal fees, any combination of those, or any other appropriate relief against the defendants. 262. Accordingly, compensatory and punitive damages and legal fees, costs and disbursements and other damages are necessary under these facts to all defendants. 263. Wherefore the groupies pray for a jury trial and for judgment against defendants for injunctive, compensatory, and punitive damages and other costs, amounts of which exceed the jurisdictional limits of all lower courts. Oh, they think they about to get paid, y'all. Third cause of action, intentional infliction of emotional distress against all defendants. Okay, 264. The groupies restate and incorporate by reference each and every allegation contained herein as though fully set forth and brought in this cause of action. 265. Defendants' acts, omissions, and other unlawful misconduct in employ, promoting, and or ratifying defendant Russell's other herein defendants and its other agents' misconduct, holding out its business ventures and its staff, agents, employee, joint ventures, and or servants as safe despite knowing and or having reason to know of the potential dangers and or past criminal acts directed against accusers of Kelly, and thereby subjecting the groupies to intimidation, harassment, and or threats by defendant Russell and other herein defendants collectively constituted extreme and outrageous conduct. 266. Defendants acted intentionally and or recklessly with utter disregard for the resultant trauma and or other harm that could or was to befall and was suffered by the groupies. 267. Defendants' conduct described herein was extreme and outrageous, and defendants knew and or should have known that that the groupies and other similarly emotionally distraught accusers of Kelly and other herein defendants would be alarmed and severely distressed if threatened with physical violence, death, and or imminent threat of substantial bodily harm. Lord Jesus. Defendants' acts, omissions, and unlawful misconduct was beyond all possible bounds of decency and should be regarded as atrocious and utterly intolerable in a civilized community. Defendants' acts, omissions, and unlawful misconduct in the regard violated Section 46 of the Restatement Second of Torts and other applicable actions and or relevant statutes and or laws. Defendants' acts, omissions, and unlawful misconduct was done with reckless disregard for the safety and well-being of the groupies and any other individual at the screening. And it goes on and on and on and on. Child, they just repeating everything. They all the way down to... Okay, let's just wrap this up. Let's jump down to number 279. As approximate result of defendant Russell's acts, as well as all other defendants herein enabling of those acts for years previously, the groupies are entitled to actual damages, compensatory damages, punitive damages, injunctive relief, legal disbursements, legal fees, and any combination of those or any other appropriate relief against all defendants. 280. Accordingly, compensatory and punitive damages and legal fees, costs and disbursements and other damages as are necessary under these facts as to all defendants. Wherefore, plaintiffs pray for a jury trial and for judgment against defendants for injunction. Let me back that up. Wherefore, the groupies pray for a jury trial and for judgment against defendants for injunctive, compensatory, and punitive damages and any other costs, amounts of which exceed the jurisdictional limits of all lower courts. Yes, they did repeat that like 3 times. I didn't just keep rereading the same page. They actually kept writing the same thing over and over and over. So respectfully submitted, Salts, Bungalusa, Munjaluzzi, and Bendesky PC. And this was written by Kristen Fenden, Robert Mungalusi, Salts Mungalusi, and Bendesky PC. And they are located at 1 Liberty Place, 52nd floor, 1650 Market Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it was dated December 1st, 2021. So, of course, I will keep you guys posted on how this nonsense unfolds. So, go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.